All right, welcome back to Midweek. And in case you're joining us now, let's shift gears and get matters to the two-third gender rule. Now, the last time this bill was presented at the floor of the parliament, there were tough stands and hard lines characterized by the glaring absence of members in the House. The hard stand positions presented to Parliament a remarkably show of defiance and shifting political parties right at the noses of their party heads. Nearly a decade since Kenya's 2010 constitution was promulgated, we ask why seemingly it's taking long to implement the two-third gender rule. Welcome to the discussion. Remember, as always, you can be part of this discussion. Tweet us at TV47KE. The hashtag to use is TV47Midweek. Let me introduce my guests today. Ruth Ambogo, to my immediate left, is a political analyst. Ken Ogembo from Siasa Place, he is the programs manager there. And Isabel Gidinji, an advocate for women leadership and youth as well. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for making time for us here on TV47. Let me ask the very premise of this discussion and peg it to the question of why seemingly it's taking long to implement the two-third gender rule. Isabel, let me start with you. Ruth, rather, let me start with you.
Okay, first of all, I think before we get into the discussion as to why it is taking a bit long to have this bill passed before Parliament and signed into law by the President and then, eventually implemented as a law, we need to discuss what was the genesis of the two-third gender principle. Why did we have it enshrined and entrenched within the new constitution? The foundation of us having the two-third gender principle introduced into the constitution was the realization that for a very long time, there have been groups and communities and individuals that have been marginalized by the political, social, and economic system of this country. And one of those groups being the women. For a long time, the political climate, the political temperature and systems have not been in favor of the women. And so this bill was introduced so that we can get to deal with marginalization and discrimination that has been taking place for a long time to remedy that. So affirmative action was introduced as a remedy that was only to take effect for a period of time until now we have the society accepting and understanding that women can also become leaders and until the time that we shall eliminate these barriers.
And is that time now taking too long?
Well, now the failure to implement the bill in the first place is what I'd attribute the failure of Parliament to pass the bill and even enact a bill that is acceptable to all members of Parliament to first and foremost I'd attribute it to lack of political goodwill. Lack of political goodwill from the legislature and the executive itself. Lack of political goodwill in what sense? First and foremost, we've had members of Parliament, and we've had female members of Parliament, we've had various civil society organizations going to court seeking advisory opinion on the implementation of this particular bill. The time lapsed. The very first deadline that was set for the implementation of that particular clause was 27th August 2015. That passed, and Parliament applied for an extension for 27th August 2016. Since then, so many bills have come to Parliament. So for me, I would attribute it to lack of political goodwill from the members of Parliament. And second, I would also attribute it to lack of strategy when it comes to female members of Parliament in terms of, lack of strategy in pushing for the implementation of this particular bill.
We'll get to the nitty-gritties. Yes. Ken, let me bring you to this discussion. For this bill to pass, Parliament requires 233 members of Parliament of its 349 members to be present. The times it has been tabled, the numbers have awkwardly been lesser than that. Is it a case of hard stance, tough-headedness in passing the bill?
Oh, okay, thank you very much. The first thing that I would like to put across is that as Siasa Place, we stand for constitutionalism. And the Constitution has pronounced itself that it needs to be there. And therefore, we support it. In my own reading, the problem is with the architects.
The architect of the Constitution?
No, the bill. Where people fail because it's a political process that also requires that you don't go alone. So if you look at it critically, in most cases, you find that we have how many women in Parliament? All of them were not there. You only find 20. There are over 50.
So, despite this being a bill that touches at the core of
that is the only thing that all of them ought to have supported. Look at some of the bills that, like finance bill, almost everybody was in the assembly. other bills, the party will whip them, all of them will come. And then when it comes to bill that is only for them to embrace what the Constitution has said, some of them had a trip to US.
And let me pose that question to Isabel as I bring her to the discussion as well. Why then would women not be at the forefront of demanding for the implementation of this, if at all it touches on them?
You know, the gender rule is not only for women. It is for both men and women.
But in this context, the beneficiaries largely would have been women.
The beneficiaries largely would be women. But women alone, even the numbers of women we have in parliament, are not sufficient to meet the 2/3 that is required in parliament. So this is an issue of both men and for both women. But what I want to underscore is that when the Constitution speaks to an issue, it is not subject to negotiation. And so we should not be talking about political goodwill or the lack of it. If we were able to implement every other issue that was required under the Constitution, including all the independent bodies and all those that were created, that only one, the very one that was about marginalization, the very one that now required that affirmative action to bring us there, is still the one we are struggling with. If you ask me, it's just that we have no rule of law. We have refused.
You don't read any politics to it, gender politics to it?
It is an issue of complying with the Constitution, bringing everything else to a stop until all provisions of the Constitution are complied with.
And you see, for you to bring everything to a stop, and I think this is where Isabel is missing it, we have to appreciate the fact that it is that lack of, you need goodwill for people to literally sit down, members of parliament to sit down and acknowledge that this is an essential bill that needs to be passed. So their failure to attend parliament, all those times that the bills, and it is not just one bill, we've had several phases of that particular bill. We've had the Mutambo bill, we've had the Duale bill, part 1, we've had the Sinjeni bill, we've had the Chepkonga bill, and the final bill that was now the last one, which was the Duale bill. So for them to fail to come to the table and actually say, let everything stop and this particular a clause of the Constitution pass means they lack political goodwill. And they
and
not
on
only,
that point, Ruth,
yes.
why do you need political goodwill in a matter that is a dictate of the Constitution?
This
if it says so, you either follow it or not.
The reality of the matter is that any other bill that passes before parliament needs lobbying. You need to actually lobby members of parliament. You don't automatically expect members of parliament to pass a bill simply because you have tabled it before parliament. Everybody has got their interests they need to serve. Everybody has got their own constituents that they are representing, varying views, varying opinion on particular issues that are brought to parliament. So when a bill comes to parliament, for instance, now the last Duale bill, you don't expect all members of parliament to agree to it because the bill does not, the bill is not a perfect representation. The question could be that the intention is there to pass the bill, but the contents of the bill are not what is agreeable to everybody else. And that is where you need political goodwill. You need members of parliament to say, okay, fine, we acknowledge that this is an important clause of the Constitution that needs to be passed, and therefore let's stop everything and push it. Political goodwill is needed for every single legislation in this particular country to pass.
Ken?
I think there's one thing that we need to understand, that by them failing to go to the assembly, they have voted.
Which in this case will mean...
So they said, they rejected it. But then some of them, because we were trying to lobby and talk to some of the MPs, and they addressed certain issues that even myself, I agree with. For one, they're saying the bill does not talk of how nominations will be done.
Yes.
Looking at the history where nominations were only preserved for certain people and they do it the way they want. The other people were also asking, when you only talk about women, what about, because that is only according to Article 27, what about Article 100 that says in the same assembly, we need to have youth, persons with minorities. So when you tell me that you only want to bring women, then it doesn't meet the constitutional threshold that requires that even people with disability must be represented in the assembly at a certain level.
And this was an alternative fronted by Majority Leader Aden Duale, which sought to create special nomination slots for women. Isabel, let me get you to the discussion as well. There are those who argue that why not make these positions competitive? that women as well, just as men, go out, vie for these positions, rather than create nominated slots? Your thoughts?
You see, we as women, and we have been now grouping together. Myself, I was a candidate in the last elections, and I was trained together with so many other women from all across Kenya, so that we were ready for the ballot. Okay, so it is not that women are just sitting and waiting until the nominations come up.
But that's how it is depicted, isn't
No,
it? However
no,
wrong
no.
it is.
Anyone who is out looking for information would actually see how many women contested in the last elections. It might not be that the numbers may not reflect as to those ones who actually passed the nomination stage. But how many came to the nominations? So many women were there from all electoral levels. So it is not that the women have been sitting. We performed better in 2017 than we did in 2013. So you can see the growth process. However, since it is an issue of bringing to equity people who have been left behind culturally and for many other reasons. So even when we went to court at the very initial stage, the court said that we will meet this progressively, and they gave a time limit. The court gave a time limit, which again now
Which was an advisory opinion by the
Yes,
Chief
it
Justice
was.
to the Attorney General.
Yes, it was.
Perfect.
And in any case, the time limit expired. So that is where I was coming back to the rule of law. We have now judgments saying that this now should happen like yesterday. So as it stands, even Parliament is sitting unconstitutionally. They do not meet the threshold. And we do not get to decide, should we or should we not? The Constitution is clear, and we have even the government, even the leader of government, and the head of state, has sworn to protect this constitution the way it is. We don't get to say, oh, we will amend. As it stands today, it should be met the way it's supposed to be. And so we are wrong right now, and we cannot continue having this discussion. It's a matter of how then, and now we are going to those issues of formulas and all that. So the political goodwill and all that should only come in terms of what formulas do we use. And therefore now the issues of political parties come in, because they are the ones who actually now do the nominations. So we can now sit down and say, what formulas are we going to use? Are we going to use the women who, you know, performed second best, or whatever formulas they are going to work with. But it's an issue of formulas, not an issue of should we or should we not.
At the extremes of these debates, equity and equality.
Yes.
That let's be 50-50%, let's all vie.
Yes.
Whoever wins, then you win.
Yes.
At the other end is that let's be more equitable to each other. Let's have more women in the representation of this. Is it a case of the equality aspect being picked as though it is the face of this debate?
Well, I think what has happened over time that the society has begun to appreciate is that the few women who have gotten an opportunity to be in political positions have actually proven that women, and this would come from the fact that a few women leaders who are, for instance, nominated in 2013 made it, got the push they needed, the relevant push they needed, now got to have an experience of what politics looks like and how it is done, and were able to make the necessary contacts, connections, and gather the goodwill of their political parties based on what they had done, and eventually ran for political seats and got nominated. Got elected. For instance, we have Martha Wangari from Gilgil, we have Naisula Lesuda, we even have our very own Waiguru, who had been nominated as a cabinet secretary, and then eventually went to run. So I think society is beginning to appreciate the fact that when women put themselves out there, but they're forgetting the fact that with the necessary support, when women put themselves out there, they can be able to run for elections and win. So affirmative action is not supposed to be, it's not supposed to be a permanent solution to a problem of previous discrimination of women. It is supposed to be a temporary solution. We are appreciating, and society fails to appreciate the fact that, and I don't know why you're not giving me, you're trying to make me not finish this point that I am trying to put across. Society fails to appreciate the fact that there is a deeply entrenched patriarchal system within the country. a system that has, in essence, denied women resources to even campaign for elections in the first place. It has made women not be able to be appreciated within, I mean, political party primaries, as she has put it. So the political party mechanisms and systems are still flawed as we speak right now. So this affirmative action was meant to last for a particular period of time until these systemic flaws and shortcomings that we have in our political system, social and economic system, are remedied to enable women to have a level playing ground. So even if we are arguing that, oh, let women run for seats just like everybody else, the playing ground is not level, and that is what affirmative action is seeking to correct. Once that is corrected, then we can say, fine, Ruth, go and run with your fellow men, and if you win, you win. If you don't win, you don't win. You know.
Ken, on the question of patriarchy and the mental madness, how much has this been a hindrance to the tough stance and the implementation of the two-third gender rule that we have seen?
That is the main problem. And you see, now this is a cultural problem finding its way into a political situation. One of the things that probably I would, if I was the person heading this thing, was to look for goodwill from both political and cultural. And this thing, like the court pronounced itself, that it was supposed to be progressive. During this period, what ought to have happened was a lot of lobbying. Because if you look at it, like even women who are in parliament were not supporting it fully. Men who are in parliament, some of them were supporting it, some of them were not supporting it. So it's not something to do with patriarchy only, but it also has some cultural background that we also, what we need is to sensitize people to understand the importance of bringing everybody on the decision-making table.
And Ken, as you respond to my question, I'm wondering what kind of a benefit can anyone on earth gain from not implementing a fair rule as such?
Okay.
If at all it is.
You see, as a country, the problem we've had is people on the decision-making table decides for everybody. Okay, whenever you want to bring other people on board, it will interfere with how they make decisions. And that is what they're trying to fight. Okay, that is why they come smartly and say, okay, if we have to give, we have to give it through nomination, which means they still want their own to come on board. Part of the reason why the bill failed is because they are saying, if it has to be done, it has to be fair. So the aspect of fairness needs to come on board. But then the other thing is everybody else needs to understand, why do we need to be fair? For me, I tend to think that most of us still do not understand why it's important for each and every person, both men, women, young and old, to be on the decision-making table.
Isabel, as simplistic as this question can be, for one who is seeking a justification as to why we should have this implemented, what case will you make then?
You see, women form over 50% of the population of Kenya. So if we are talking about how we want to be governed, because the whole issue of leadership is when the people decide for themselves how they want to be governed. And so we are saying women also have a say as to how they want to be governed. And they have said it clearly and have made sure that it is now captured in the Constitution. And you know, the process of constitution making required a lot of even negotiations, so that even that two-third gender rule became captured in the Constitution. It was a process of negotiation. So women decided for themselves that not less than a third. And you see, that is the minimum. You see, it is the minimum. So in fact, anyone who wishes to really adhere to this rule should even show us, even at the level of appointments, because it's both elective and appointments,
yes,
that we should see, not when we are struggling with that formula so much so that we even have point something of a person to decide whether we should actually, let's say with the cabinet formation, where we're going to have 6 or is it 7, where is the minimum falling, until you find a point of a person, you see. Why not exceed it by 3 or 4, you know, altogether, you know, so that we can even go to 40% or 50%. Look at devolution. Devolution talked about not less than 15%, but the government goes up to 30. So even on this issue of a third, it is the minimum. So we should not even be struggling with this third. We should be going beyond ourselves, looking at the women. The women are a resource. All these politicians, they run to women to be their voters. They run to women to be their mobilizers. Women are very good for any politician up to the time of voting. But no, don't come and sit with us at the decision table. You're just good up to here. And then from here, women go back to the kitchen. It doesn't work like that.
And given that the resistance seemingly by the absence of the members in the House that we have seen, is it something negotiable? Is there anything below than, if we are talking of 50-50 and above, which is impressive, is there anything below than a third?
No, the Constitution says not less than a third.
It's
and
not
again,
negotiable.
something else, Abubakar, if I would say. If today Parliament was told, you know, just like how they go to get their own salaries, increment and all that, if they were told that Parliament is going to be dissolved because we do not meet the threshold, I assure you the next day it will be passed.
a bill.
Because their interests now will be at stake. But until that we can still, there's still room for negotiations, Kina Mama can still wait. We cannot wait any longer. Yes.
And in March, the 2017, High Court Judge John Mativo ruled that any Kenyan could file a petition to the Supreme Court and dissolve Parliament for failure. The Chief Justice then can dissolve the Parliament for failure to pass the gender rule.
Yes.
I mean, we've had CRU, we've had Crown Trust, we've had Maendeleo ya Wanawake, we've even had LSK filing such petitions. And one of the things that we have to deal with as a country, over and above the lack of political goodwill, the failure, the lack of interest to pass this bill,
last East Africa competition, jump rope competition, I was
Mke na mume wanafunga ndoa katika kijiji kidogo mchini Misri. Watakisimulia sherehe yao ya ndoa iliyokuwa ikiongozwa na mwanamke, kinyume kabisa na itikadi za Kiislamu na nchi ya Misri kwa ujumla, kwani shughuli za kufungisha ndoa hutekelezwa na wanaume. Lakini katika kijiji cha Kanayat katika kaskazini mwa mji wa Zagazig, Amal Sulaiman mwenye umri wa miaka 43 ni kadhi aliyeidhinishwa na kufungisha ndoa takribani 3,000 baada ya kupokea kibali hicho. Wakati huo, Suleiman alikuwa amekamilisha shahada yake ya masters katika sheria na alikuwa anatafuta ajira. Mume wake alimrai aombe nafasi ya marehemu mjombake. Alifikiria wazo hilo kwa muda. Ilimchukua mwaka mmoja kushindana na wanaume